The following is the transcription of a taped interview between the director of Demindology and the director of the Institute for Parasociopsychology in the Middle West. The Institute director was unaware of the precise occupation of the demindological director. Their meeting took place at the annual convention of directors of the learned disciplines. To the director of Demindology, the evidence of the director of the Institute seemed peculiarly apropos, since it was just from such a direction that the strongest opposition to demindology once came. At one time, it was thought that the affairs of the world really were influenced, if not actually managed, by deminded. These deminds were taken to be intelligent, but not corporeal creatures. At least not corporeal in the sense that mankind is. The deminds were thought to have their origin variously as God created angels who had chosen to rebel, or as the other half of the spirit world, the spirit turned towards darkness and a universal balance on equal oppositions between light, dark, good, and evil. The deminds had as the end of such action of theirs as impinged upon the human continuum the corruption and ruin of human beings and the general bad going of the world. The deminds took as their means for this every end, from the tormenting of mankind with plagues and earthquakes to the actual spiritual corruption of individual men who, having lost their own will to that of the deminded, were said to be possessed. The latter history of the deminded, as the demonism and demindology, is well enough known to require but the slightest reference here. Ignorant man, and mark that the qualification is ignorant and not either stupid or ill-willed, but ignorant. Then, man knew for ages that if, for example, he stepped off the edge of a precipice, he would most likely and most probably fall very rapidly to the bottom, where, depending on the height of the fall, his own position upon re-establishing contact with the earth, the nature of the surface at the bottom, and other variables, he would find himself in one of several stages of serious misfortunes. Normally, these range from bruises and lacerations through partial dismemberments to total misfortune or death. Now, as we have since scientifically verified, ignorant man's belief that this chain of events would follow his stepping off the cliff was essentially correct. Ignorant but prudent, man therefore took it as a rule of conduct not to step off cliffs. Ignorant man, however, attributed the chain of events subsequenting to stepping off cliffs to the wrong reason. He attributed to the deminded who, he imagined, were able to get at him in the air more easily than on solid ground, and who, in his naive worldview, abruptly seized him by the legs and yanked him down into the abyss. Thus, when the ignorant man avoided the edges of cliffs, and especially avoided stepping off such edges, we may say that he performed a correct action for the wrong reason. Presently, the physical scientist Newton made his studies and came up with some new answers. In the post-Newtonian world view, man, no longer ignorant, has learned that if he steps off the precipice, he will, as before, fall directly to the bottom and will, at the very least, be bruised and, at most, be killed. But he now knows this is due not to deminds, but to gravity. When, therefore, well-informed man nowadays avoids the edges of cliffs, we may say that this is a good action for the right reasons. The change, although slight, is an outward conduct, is a significant advance in mankind's slow climb towards consciousness and rationality. Much the same process of new information shedding light on old problems, behavior patterns, and observable phenomena has, of course, been taking place in the non-physical sciences. For example, ignorant man, when he had successfully avoided the edge of the cliff and got home to the village once more, might find that the man up the street had filled his day not with the socially acceptable and personally advisable activity of avoiding the edges of cliffs, but with the unsocial action of chopping up his mother with the lumberman's axe. In the olden times, ignorant man and his fellow ignorant villagers would, it is presumed, attribute this action to the influence of Deminds upon the woodsman. They would most likely kill the culprit on the grounds that he had taken the life and must, therefore, lose his own. Or they might have conceivably judged his demondic infestation to be such as required isolating him from the community. They would therefore place him in some kind of confinement, perhaps for a given period of time, but probably for the rest of his life, in the curious belief that this would help prevent other such occurrences in the future. In the light of reason, we can see the folly of this, of course, for, after all, the man had been but one mother, and, having killed her, may be presumed to have worked out completely his suppressed tendencies toward matricide. How differently, thanks to modern advances in psychosocial sciences, we handle such things today. Today, our judicial machinery is still based on the antiquated notions of punishment for crime and of what we call the protection of society, as if society could be protected from the primal human urges that lie deep in the unconscious of every man, and that takes study, experimentation, and patience, day by day labor on the part of the parapsychosocial scientists to recognize, uncover, and cure. But in spite of the archaic legal system, we are still able to help society prevent the dreadful waste of a second human life just because one has already, unfortunately, been sacrificed. Today we see at once that the man who kills his mother has something wrong with him. He is sick. He is, in fact, a very sick man. But he can be cured. How much better is it for society and for the man himself to undertake the cure and, after a few years, necessary not so much for the treatment as to give society a chance to forget, to return the patient to an active life? To those of us who actually engage in the slow process of remaking mankind and with him society, it seems self-evident that this is worthwhile work. Yet, there is an opposition, constant opposition, ranging from vulgar heckling to vicious and sometimes successful legal suits. As this classic example, and undoubtedly an extreme influential factor in the general lack of cooperation we encounter, I cite the sensation-mongering attitudes of the American press. In a case like the one just hypothesized, for example, the press from the very beginning, having made rational judgments impossible for the layman, a term that there here, of course, includes members of the bar and of the bench, by printing all available details on the unfortunate event itself and on the full background of the patient. Worse still, assuming that the patient's treatment was successful and he was released. The press could be counted upon to dredge up the whole sorry business all over again, thus inevitably stating the patient's post-convalescence on a very bad note. Under the circumstances, it is hardly surprising that such a patient occasionally suffers a relapse, with a complete repetition of his original symptomatic action, namely, the doing away with another human being. Then it is that the press shows its true colors, and it invariably takes the side of the obscurantism, takes the side of the obscurantisms against the progress. Both events are reviewed thoroughly with all available photographs. Statements by responsible psychiatrists are held up to ridicule, and the press leads public opinion in an orgy of denunciations of all the latest thought in both parapsychology, psychology, and parasociopsychology, and all the associating sologies. I suppose I need not lecture you on the timidity of politicians. At moments like these, they seem to lose all their faith in science. They issue rash statements, and they pass rash laws. Some very good men have lost important penological consultating posts in such circumstances. Still worse, the patient in question, who, now if ever, is ready for a complete cure, is taken out of the hands and permanently put away in one way or the other. Hence my growing belief, scarcely as yet formulated into hypothesis, that we may have been hasty in putting down the deminded. They may, after all, be still alive, still prowling the edges of our world, seeking whom they may devour, corrupting the press, intimidating governments, and turning every man's hand against true science. What would be more natural, when you think about it, than for the Deminds, decisively defeated and deprived of a domain by the parasciences, to bide their time and now strike back, disguised as tabloid editors, as indignant letter writers, and as wee Sleaton, Keaton, Cowran, Timo governors, and members of the parole boards. Doctors are always discovering that the old discredited folk remedies have a scientific basis after all. One of the major branches of contemporary literature is devoted to such rediscoveries. Something similar may be going on with the deminded. If so, the time is right for a demindological rediscovery, unmasking and repurging of our society. Was the Inquisition really a mistake? Can't we put a torque on the torquemada? For the truth is, we in the parasciences are on the very threshold of reshaping the world. The stakes are too high to allow a handful of deminded, relics from a cruder age and motivated out of sheer spite to wreck the dream we can build. All of our activities with penitentiary patients point to the remaking of human nature. Again, back at the Institute, through drugs and the weaving of baskets, we have been able to calm down and redirect the most furious energies. But in every case, however, obvious our success, we are faced with the same problem. Sooner or later, the patient leaves the institution and returns to the outside world and to the problem that sent him to us in the first place. Months of scientific endeavors vanish in a moment. What we need is to control the outside world too. And if it can be done, the deminded confine themselves mainly to the spheres of politics. Unknown to them, we have outflanked them. Our agents are entrenched in business and industry and education and in medicine and vast areas of communication. For merchandising, for music and drama on the tiny screen, for wit and wisdom at the fireside, people consult us as if they did fortune tellers. Surely this is a power as valid and as potent as the elected officials. Surely this is the key to placid living for everyone and to universal dignity, or individual destiny guided and controlled by the people equipped to do it, the socio-scientists of the new age. As with the patients in penitentiaries and the patients at the Institute itself, the means already exist. The problem is solely one of their application, that in turn resolves itself largely into the problem of dealing with the deminded in press and politics. Both fields are notoriously corrupt, yet both, beyond readership, surveys, and private polls on the parasociopsychological aspects of new policies and personalities, remain strangely deaf to the logic of science. Both have a fixation on what they call civil rights, a set of archaic protections of the individual against society. The point they miss is that such legal safeguards are necessarily desirable in early ages, if for nothing else, to permit the rise of the parasciences. The old-time policeman, like the old-time landlord, had to be limited in his power because his goals were selfish and his ignorance appalling. Parascience desires only the good of society and the individual who compose it. Parascience also has the knowledge to bring these goods about. In such a situation, such a concept as a civil rights becomes not only superfluous, but a positive detriment in human progress. It may well be that the new demindology is the answer. It may be well that the deminded have survived their destruction and are with us all still, standing between mankind and his noblest vision. It well may be that the obstacle can be removed.